we have this what we call types of tests. Okay, types of tests could be classified into the following. Types of tests could be number one, according to mode of response, number two, according to ease of quantification of response, number three, according to mode of administration, number four, according to test constructor, number five, according to mode of interpreting results, number six, according to nature of answer. Now, what do we mean by this classifications? Let's begin by the first classification of the types of tests, and that is according to mode of response. Tests could be oral, and when we say oral, we refer to oral communication skills. Okay, so oral recitation or oral testing is used to measure the oral communication skills of the learners. So you want here to test also if the students have this understanding of the concepts, of the theories and procedures. And of course, this is more inclusive and less discriminatory because it permits those learners who cannot write or with some writing problems, reading problems, because all they have to do is to utter, to speak, okay, to say, to state what they know. Yet, okay, this type of testing is time consuming because you have to test the learners individually. Okay, we cannot ask them to recite as in chorus. Okay, we cannot ask them to state their opinion one or we cannot ask them to state their opinion in one time. So again, it is time consuming. Aside from assessing the higher order thinking skills for oral testing, we can also use oral testing for lower levels of cognition. Okay, next is written. Okay, this is through the form of written test, paper, pen, test. So just like what we have mentioned a while back, examples for this are alternate response or true or false type of test, multiple choice, matching type of test, short answer essays, okay, completion, or anything that requires the learners to write. Okay, but of course, with the advent of online teaching, we transform this written type of test into clicking or through clicking using the computer, clicking for their answer, typing their answer. That's still classified as written in virtual format. The setback of this type of test is that it requires time to prepare. Unlike for oral test, okay, as long as you have the question in mind or you prepare the question, it could be asked, okay, it could be raised to the learners. But for written test, it requires time because I repeat, before writing the test items, there are researches, there are bases that we need to consider. Like we also need to prepare the table of specification, okay, in order to budget appropriately the distribution of topics to the test items. In terms of fairness, we could say that written testing is generally fair and efficient. Like it's easy to check. Okay, in some other schools, they are actually using machines. Okay, to check on this test papers. They would shade the learners will shade the answers, and then the machine would automatically check. Okay, the number of correct answers. But for some traditional method, and I still find them effective, I ask also my learners to recheck their answers, and we do it at one time. Okay, we do it together. So the teacher would be given a chance to correct some misconceptions. Okay, even if it's a paper pen test, you would immediately identify those learners who missed the items, and then you could provide immediate feedback for that item they missed. Last is what we call the performance-based test. So the learners could answer orally, the first one. The learners could answer using a written output, and they could also use performance. Okay, they could also perform. So when say performance-based, this requires learners to demonstrate skills or ability to perform specific actions. So this is otherwise known as performance assessment. If we would cite examples for this, we could have problem-based learning. Okay, we could also have inquiry task. We could also have inquiry tasks. We could also have exhibits, presentation tasks, and capstone performances. So these are tasks that must be authentic, meaningful, in-depth, and multidimensional. However, the drawback of this mode is that sometimes, because we expect our learners to produce output, to produce a project, or to come up with a proposal, it requires time. That's number one. It could be costly, and in terms of effort. Okay? Sometimes the learners need to go out and you have to ask for parental consent. Just make sure that when you use this type of testing, you use appropriate criteria, appropriate rubrics to measure their output, whether it's a performance based output or like they need to perform, or it could be an outcome based assessment, like they need to produce a product, or should I say product based assessment. So it's very important to note that even if we have this different classifications, okay, according to mode of response, the combination of these three is highly suggested. We should not stick only to one, and we should use these three into our advantage. When we combine these three, like what we are always saying, we need to vary. We need to vary what we present. When we teach, we vary our technique. So when we assess, we also need to vary our technique. So we become uh, unpredictable, and we are if the teachers are if the teachers were unpredictable, of course, the learners will be excited, will get excited every day, okay, on what will happen next. Next, a type of test is according to ease of quantification or a next type of test is according to ease of quantification of response. So it can be objective and subjective. We already highlighted this a while back. When we say objective, it can be corrected and quantified very easily because the scores can be readily compared. And we are only looking for a single specific answer. So we could also ask our learners to recheck their own test paper, or we could ask them to exchange papers and then check the papers of their classmates. In that case, we could do some corrections immediately. Or, okay, if you have the machine, the availability of the machine, okay, if it's online, it automatically checks also the answers and provide you the results. But for the traditional method in which we ask our learners to check their test papers, it's also advantageous because we could identify immediately those items they missed. Okay. Next is the subjective dive, like what we've mentioned. This elicits varied responses, like for restricted and extended response essays. So this is not easy to check, though it's easy to devise, easy to design. Okay, just create a question, okay, maybe around 30 minutes. Okay, that's too much for creating an essay type of test. Okay, it's easy to construct test items for subjective types of testing. However, when you ask your learners to submit, that's the time that the teacher will have to offer much time to check. Okay, and we should not guess while checking. Again, there should be a basis like a rubric when we check as a type of test. Make sure also that when you check essays, you are checking what is intended to be checked. Some teachers would fail to consider that the content is more important than the grammar. Sometimes, even if the learner knows the answer and the learner has answered correctly in terms of content, but failed to present his or her idea grammatically. Sometimes the impression to other teachers would be it's not, it looks like it's not correct. Okay, we need to detect very carefully and to differentiate between grammar and the content. So if your lesson maybe is about grammar and then you ask that in a subjective type of test, then maybe that could be part of the checking. Or if you would like to include grammar as part of the checking of the essay type of test, it should be part of the rubric, presented, of course, to the learners prior to taking the test. So they would know what's expected from them. Again, for objective, it's a single or specific convergent answer. Examples are multiple choice type of test. Okay, we also have definition of terms. We also have true or false, completion, fill in the blanks. Okay, matching items. Next type of test is according to mode of administration. So we know very well that we could conduct tests individually or in a group. So the purpose of doing individual tests um, is to identify or to gather data about the learner's cognitive functioning, the individual learner's cognitive functioning, and their ability to perform specific tasks. This is also used to pinpoint giftedness. Okay, of course, you need to test them individually if you would like to know who's gifted among them, who has learning disabilities such as dyslexia, dyscalculia. Okay, dyslexia relates to reading, dyscalculia relates to numeracy skills. Okay, we also have dysgraphia, which relates to writing, dysprasia, dysphasia, visual or auditory processing. So this disabilities could be identified if we test them individually. So I repeat, for individual learning achievement, that should be done individually. So we conduct an individual testing. But if you would like to uh, promote collaboration among your learners, if you would like them to learn from each other, if you would like to use this what we call cooperative technique or collaborative technique inside your classroom, then you may use the group test. So this is administered, of course, to a class or group simultaneously to address practical need of testing, such as uh, if you are aware of grouping the learners inside the classroom, like grouping those who are musically inclined, grouping those who are good in arts, grouping those who are good in dancing, for instance, and then you would ask them to tackle on the same lesson using their skills. For example, if it's a story and then you would like them to interpret the lesson of the story, maybe the musically inclined would be asked or would be tasked to create a song, okay? A song depicting lyrics, okay, that represent their thoughts about the story. The artistic could be tasked to create a poster which depicts a message that reflects, of course, their interpretation of the story. Same with those who are good in dancing. Okay, they could do some interpretative dancing in order to uh, prove, okay, or to relay the message that they have learned from the text. So that's for group testing. This test is usually objective and answers are more or less restricted. Okay, for group test. Students are assessed in all items of test. Okay, students may become bored, okay, with easy items, as we all know, and anxious over difficult ones. So information obtained from this test is not as comprehensive as those from individual tests. Next type of test according to test constructor. So it could be standardized or non-standardized. Standardized tests are prepared by specialists. Okay, like in our case, uh, our education program supervisor in our division, okay, under the Department of Education, is the one in charge, okay, to construct, to review the standardized test, which is distributed quarterly. Like at the end of first quarter, we will receive standardized examinations to be, of course, taken by the group of learners. So the purpose of this one is that the specialist, the test constructor on standardized tests, make sure that the principles of assessment are followed. So this is not done haphazardly. Okay, because you are going to administer this one in a large group of students and examiners in similar conditions. So if, for instance, there are 13 sections in grade 6 or in grade 7, then they will take the examination at the same time. Okay, or if everyone is inside the school, then everyone should take the test inside the school. So that's the basic feature of standardized tests. While non-standardized test refers to a test prepared by teachers. By the way, for a standardized test, the specialist that we are talking about here could also be the teacher. So if the teacher has mastered, he has this what we call training on test construction, then he or she is qualified to construct standardized tests. While for non-standardized tests, the disadvantage is that it may include test construction that could be done haphazardly because the test constructors are less skilled. They are skilled, but not as skilled as the specialists and the experts when it comes to um, designing the standardized test. So this may include one or several test formats. So it's not simply, this may include different formats. So it's not simply definition of terms. Okay, you could vary the way you uh, format your examination. Like in standardized tests, most of the time they are in multiple choice type. Okay, just like in the public school, every time we have our periodic examination, it's always multiple choice items. Next type of test is according to mode of interpreting results. So tests that yield norm reference interpretation and the tests that allow criterion preference interpretation. So tests that yield norm reference interpretations refers to survey tests, okay, and interest inventories. This also includes standardized achievement test, okay, because we are going to compare, okay, the results, okay, we are going to compare the results of the testing, and then we shall identify the rank, for instance, the relative rank or position of the test taker. So this measures students' performance in relation to the performance of a group in a test. So that's what we mean by norm reference. There is a comparison of the performance of student A to the other students inside the classroom. While for the other classification, that is the testing that allow criterion reference interpretation, this describes students' performance using an agreed or pre-established criterion or level of performance. For example, if you are using rubric, okay, the expectations are written in the rubric. And once you test the performance, you are going to compare the actual performance to the set criterion or the set standards, okay, the set competencies, okay, those set descriptors in your rubric. So the criterion is the domain of the subject matter and not the cut-off score. That's what we need to remember. So cut score is established in a mastery test to determine the level of mastery of learners in a given unit of instruction. However, it's very important to remind ourselves that setting the score differs depending on the standards of the teacher. That's why this criterion reference is somewhat subjective compared to the first interpretation, which is, of course, uh, norm reference. Another type of test is according to nature of answer. Okay, so it could be first personality tests, second achievement tests, third aptitude test, fourth intelligence tests, fifth we have social metric tests, sixth we have trade or vocational tests. Personality tests is first developed in the 1920s, and in here, of course, since we are testing the personality, there is no right or wrong answer. This intends to measure the personality and behavior styles of the learner. Like if you are going to apply for a job, of course, one of the requirement, the test that you need to pass is the personality test. This is also useful in career guidance. Okay, our guidance counselors are actually doing this in order to gauge your personality, to measure your personality, which they will use, of course, for counseling. Next, we have the achievement test, such as the very known national achievement test. This is to measure whether the learner meets the expected standards for that particular grade level. So if you finished elementary and once you move into grade 7, you have to take the national achievement test, and in there, our higher ups, okay, the people from the higher ups, the officials, are actually gauging whether the curriculum implementation matches with uh, or the curriculum implementation produces desired results. What do we mean by desired results? Desired results refer to targeting the set standards by the higher authorities, the higher offices. Like if DepEd would set the objectives in the National Achievement Test, they are identifying whether this group of learners has mastered this group of learners has mastered the requisite skills, the required competencies to be mastered in that particular grade level. Next, we have the aptitude test. Okay, the aptitude test gauges the potential. Okay, gauges the potential of the learner. Like if you move to college, there is this what we call aptitude test. Okay, in order to identify the potential courses that you are aligned to, that your skills are aligned to. It will also ask, of course, about your interests. Okay, like for high school, before moving to senior high school, I think, and into college, they have to take the national college. They have to take the NCAE, okay, the National College Admission Examination. This is to provide information to the learners about their potential courses in college. So there will be no mismatch. So that's an example of the aptitude test. For intelligence tests, this refers, of course, to testing the cognitive ability, the mental ability of the learner. So this may contain items on verbal comprehension. Okay, this may contain abstract reasoning. Okay, mathematical question items. Okay, grounded on recognized theory of intelligence. So this taps on various aspects of intelligence, such as analytic, practical, and creative. So it's more on gauging the mental ability of the learner. So one example would be uh, identifying the intellectual quotient of the learner, the IQ. Okay, they use intelligence tests to identify the IQ level of a person, of a learner. Next is sociometric tests. Okay, this refers to interpersonal, measuring the interpersonal relationship of a learner, okay, who is within the group. Okay, this is more of stating the preferences, the likes and dislikes for other members. So if you know Pinoy Big Brother, in which they nominate the housemates, okay, and when they are nominating, they would state the reason why they are nominating. They are giving scores, diba? 2 points for the person they do not like the most, and then 1 point for the person they do not like. Okay, so it's similar to that. It's more of identifying the attitude, the values, okay, behavior, okay, or the qualities, should I say, of a person through the eyes of others. So this is sociometric test. From the word social, it refers to a society. So that you will be tested, you will be described, you will be judged, okay, by the people around you. Next is trade or vocational tests. So in here, of course, from the words trade and vocational, this measures the individual competence or knowledge of a learner in terms of a particular occupation. So if, for instance, for baking, okay, they would test your skills about baking. Of course, you need to take NC2, okay, the National Certificate for Baking. Ito yung mga NC2, no? So, in here, we include the National Certificate given by TESDA. Okay, so this referred to trade or vocational skills. Okay, this may be used to determine the value of a training program, like for TESDA. So, again, the types of tests according to nature of